Well, hello everybody. Welcome to BlueMarbleScience. If we take a plastic ruler, some matches, and Phuket Word, guess what we have? Instant dumpster fire. Some people have a problem seeing things in three dimensions. Phuket Word, on the other hand, I think just has a problem seeing, period. Even when he demonstrates the curvature of the earth, he immediately attributes it to some sort of magical perspective. So, warning. This video will pose a potential fall hazard, as you may fall out of your chair during periods of uncontrolled laughter. The oven mitts are not strictly necessary for this episode. However, it never hurts to have them around just in case. Hey Gladys, are you ready? Good, let's light this dumpster fire and have some fun.
Hello, Flat Earth researchers, debaters and debunkers. With this flexible ruler representing the surface of the Earth, we are going to disprove the ridiculous notion that the heliocentric model and the spinning globe best fit reality. You'll often hear people argue that the heliocentric model is the best at making predictions and it fits with the observations and measurements that we can make on the Earth. But we're going to do two things in this very simple demonstration that completely disprove that and show that it is perspective of our subjective observations that are converted into an illusionary objective reality to have us believe that we live on a globe. And we are going to debunk or disprove that the Eratosthenes experiment somehow proves the circumference of us being on a globe Earth, and in fact it doesn't fit with reality at all. So just use your imagination to have this ruler representing the surface of the Earth, and the distance between these matchsticks can be whatever you like. It can be a mile, 10 miles, 100 miles, 1,000 miles. It's really up to you. And the matchsticks can represent lampposts, or the match heads can be the sun or moon or stars in the sky traveling off into the distance or above the surface of the Earth. And we'll see how perspective is converted into an imaginary curve, and that's simply by keeping in mind that this kind of view, this side-on orthographic view, is what you might call an objective view. We do not really have this kind of view of the Earth unless we are looking at something very distant, like a mountain range, or it could be windmills, or it could be the pylons across Lake Pontchartrain, if you like, often used as some kind of proof that we live on a spherical planet. But of course we are never really given this kind of view. It's almost impossible to fit this kind of view into a camera, so you have to get really far away in order to see it. But the view that we usually have is more like this, and we can see here how perspective comes into play.
Well, Phuket is showing us perspective in this picture, and that's fine. Let's put some lines in here. There's a line, straight line across for the base of the matches, as close as I could get it. And I put a line across the top, and that's what perspective does. And the intersection of those two lines, of course, is at the vanishing point. And this is perfect for a flat surface, but what happens if we try to impose those lines on something that is actually curving around the surface of the Earth? Let's say maybe the Lake Pontchartrain Causeway. This is one that Soundly did. I believe you can see that the bridge definitely curves away from that line. It no longer acts like a flat surface, and there's a good reason for that. It's not. Yeah, Nick. Whoops.
Now I've got the ruler level as I can make it, and of course you can see that what we get is this result of perspective, where you have the surface closest to us in the lower corner of the view, and this surface over here, or this end of the surface over here, rising up to the camera's eye level. And we also get this kind of declination of the tops of the matchsticks, simply due to perspective and angular size. Yeah, so I'll try and keep it horizontal. Yeah, and it's when we get this angle like this that we see what appears to be things sinking off into the distance, but that is then given to us in this side-on view, and the declination or the inclination of the surface that we see in this view is then converted into a curve on the surface.
Okay, what just happened? You lost me there, Chief. Somehow or the other, the view gets converted to... keep going. Maybe it'll get better.
It's as simple as that. Yeah, this view where we are looking horizontally across the surface, and we see this inclination and declination, is then converted into a curved surface to give us that same inclination and declination. But the reality is that the surface actually remains flat. So we have perspective being converted into this imaginary curve. You see? It's really very simple. And we've got to keep in mind that any observation that we make as far as angles and distances don't change. This ruler is, however long it is, doesn't change if we bend it or keep it flat. The distance between the matchsticks doesn't change, but it's all a matter of interpretation when we convert what we see in our subjective reality into this imaginary objective reality, and then we have to curve the surface to make that inclination or declination that we see from perspective and convert it into an imaginary curve. It's very simple. Again, the measurements or the angles do not change. You see, in this kind of view, we have angles. In this kind of view, we have no angles. So the angles are put in by giving the surface a curve that simply doesn't exist.
Okay, so let me get this straight. The surface, which is flat, like this, ends up looking like that for reasons which we don't seem to understand. How can that be? That just doesn't seem to make sense unless the surface looks more like that. What do you think?
Of course, in illustrations of the globe, we might be told to imagine that we are an observer here, for example, and of course what will happen is we then believe that we are looking into some kind of bulge of curvature, when the reality is that all we're doing is looking across a flat surface with a horizontal line of sight, and that surface appears to rise to eye level. Yeah? It's a simple conversion. Perspective becomes an imaginary curve. So what we have here now is a miniature version of the Eratosthenes experiment. So again, we've got the curved surface of the Earth, and I've got this paper under it just so we can see the shadows more clearly in line with the curve. And when we shine a light on it, this is the kind of effect we get. We get shadows that do change in length and angle on this curved surface. But of course, the heliocentric model has us with a very, very distant sun. So if I make that sun more distant and bring the shadows out, you can see that what actually happens is that the shadows do become more parallel, and they become about the same length, which is not what we see in reality. What we see in reality is a close sun creating shadows of differing lengths. Yeah, you can see that as I take the light source away, as is with the heliocentric model, then the shadows become the same length all across the Earth.
Hold on a second. These shadows are not the same length. This shadow is quite a bit longer than this shadow. See that?
That shouldn't happen. And if this light source was much, much bigger, we simply wouldn't get clearly defined shadows across the surface, because the light would be shining down all over the surface. So to actually have shadows with a distant and massive sun on a curved Earth simply isn't possible. Yeah, so that in itself debunks the Eratosthenes experiment and the idea that the results somehow prove that we live on a curved Earth, because otherwise we'd have either no shadows with a massive light source, or we'd have shadows that are always an equal length the further away the sun is. So let's just put this down on the... I'll take this away now, we won't need it. Let's just make a flat Earth Eratosthenes experiment, and we can see here that we get exactly what we need to get, and something that fits with our observations, with a local sun. Above this point here we have no shadow, and we have those shadows getting longer and longer the further away they get from the light source.
You actually got that exactly backwards. I've borrowed this from the Eratosthenes experiment that Bob the science guy and I did back in the spring. He and I are at two different latitudes. He's at about 44 degrees north. I'm at 36 degrees north. Now, one thing you said is absolutely true. You could cast the shadow on a flat surface just like you do on a curved surface. It would be rather pointless to do Eratosthenes if the Earth were flat, because there is no circumference to a flat line. Nonetheless, when we did the experiment, this is what we found. Measuring the angle to the sun from my latitude, I got a much higher sun elevation than Bob did measuring it from his latitude. And this happens at every latitude. If we did this 50 times, we'd have 50 different sun elevations. That's the problem. On the other hand, if we use a curved surface, the radius of the Earth, and use our sun angle measurements, it works perfectly with the parallel rays of sunlight that we observe. Obviously, the sun can't be at two different elevations at the same time. This is what proves the Earth is curved.
Okay, these angles are going to get sharper and sharper as they get off into the distance. Okay, so basically what we're doing here is we are imagining we're looking at this light. So the angle on the surface of the Earth towards the light is like this. Again, this reflects what we can observe in reality, but of course what we're given with the illustrations of the globe is parallel lines of light. So again, remember that these matchsticks now represent represent the rays of light. So what's done, of course, is to have those parallel rays of light, we are then given a curved surface, and those angles then become straight lines. No, this isn't. Of course, people will laugh at this and say, oh, there's no precise measurements. It's not supposed to be. You can see for yourself that the angles that we would get on a flat surface are then turned into parallel lines when we are given a curved surface. So it really is just a matter of converting our subjective reality into an objective reality. Again, an objective reality that we don't see. we don't see parallel rays of light coming in. We see rays of light coming in like this, just as we saw with the shadows.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but I am speechless. We could talk about how the rays of light from the sun are parallel, or pretty much so, by the time they reach us because of the distances, and we could go through all that stuff again, but there's no point in it. Let's just enjoy the moment, shall we? Hey, I hope you guys had a good time watching this. If you did, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons down there at the bottom, and we will see you on the next one. Hey, Gladys, we're out of here.